Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyagolu. Now, if you've had your fill of dusty tomes filled with Frost, Yeats, Wordsworth, and possibly even Wole Soyinka or Shakespeare, well, why not tap into the new guard of spoken word artists emerging in Nigeria and across Africa? Well, one such spoken word performer who is becoming increasingly popular for her art is Maryam Bukar Hassan, also known as Alhanislam, a young poet, writer, and activist against domestic violence from Borno State, which is the epicenter of the Islamist insurgency in Nigeria's northeast region. So popular, in fact, has Maryam become that she commands tens of thousands of views on Instagram and millions of hits on YouTube. And she's not even 25 yet. Can you bear it? With her clear diction and deep honesty, she's become a tremendous inspiration and motivator for many young people in Nigeria, particularly in the north. Well, in a moment, I'll be joined here in the studio by Maryam Bukar Hassan herself. But first, here she is in classic performance mode.
Speak about my country at 59 is to conjure up the ghost of a warrior, an Iroquois tree that stood tall in the forest, survived the axe with broken branches that answers questions of vulnerability, with fallen dried leaves turned dust, creating a pathway leading to my heart, me, a citizen of a country whose hope lingers like the life of an antelope, who wakes up every morning with its heart jumping out its chest, knowing there's a cheetah out there that it must outrun, else it becomes prey. Praying every day that somehow we see the light and hope for our nation. To speak about my country at 59 is to recall handshakes between the Princess Alexandra and Sir Tafawa Balewa in the 1960s that held promises of generations, aspirations of what it is for a dream to come true, an answered prayer. To speak about my country at 59 is to revisit the words of Sir Nnamdi Azikiwe, where he says, "For 25 years of my life, I fought for the freedom of Nigeria. Nigeria will gain independence on October 1st, 1960, and it makes no difference who becomes Prime Minister, whether be Tafawa Balewa, Awolowo, or myself. So long as Nigeria is free, I will be satisfied." To speak about my country at 59 is to celebrate the largest river in West Africa, the River Niger, that carries the name Nigeria at its core. So when a poet says, "I love my country," I love my country, but because. Words signifying doubt, yes, serving as a seal to conviction and forgiveness, like, "But I forgive my kinsmen for their mistakes, and for my country I will represent," like, "You broke my heart, but I still love you." I left my hometown, never to return again. When the first bomb dropped, I looked at my mom, asked her to play that CD because those were things I saw in Hollywood films. And just like that little girl's scream, I felt her living in me, but I was too scared. I had lost my voice before it made the escape. So I died in silence while my stomach made the noise. It was never a feeling of butterflies because there was no lover at sight. It was rather a serious case of diarrhea instigated by thoughts of burns, of lost hopes, how for some tomorrow may never come, so those dreams got buried by the sounds of guns. How the lad you watched and loved grow has your name on a list and it reads, "Rest in peace, we didn't see it coming."
Well, the poet, writer and spoken word performer Maryam Bukar Hassan, popularly known as Alhanislam, will be joining me in the studio in just a moment. But it's just interesting, isn't it, whilst we wait for her to sort of get settled in, that it takes a lot of confidence to be a spoken word performer and poet? I mean, particularly when you come from a very different background, different from people who would normally do these things. And it would be interesting to find out how one summons up the courage to do that. I mean, and also inherent within all that is a message for people in Nigeria. The message, you know, that may well be different for people from different parts of the country, and also what it is that actually inspires a person to go into performance poetry, whether or not there is a sense that there is this sort of reforming power in it, something that can help people speak out when they perhaps feel a bit shy and closeted, and allows them to address a wide range of issues. It's a topic that we're all hugely interested in and curious about, and I'm happy to say that we've got the lady herself now, Maryam Bukar Hassan, in the studio. And I want to say thank you very much indeed. I know it was a bit of a struggle getting here, but then you got here in the end.
Right.
Have you got your breath?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. We've been watching your videos. They're absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
I imagine it takes a lot of confidence to be a spoken word performer and a poet. How do you summon up the courage to do that?
I think for me, it has always been how my mother brought me up.
And your mom is a famous actress.
Yes, she was.
Was a famous actress, right. She passed away
2 years ago.
Right, but she was very well known in Nollywood and in Kannywood, as they call it. How?
Maina.
Yeah, that's it. Very well known. Sorry, go on.
So I think it has to do with how my mother brought me up. She was quite a confident woman, and she was somebody who would always want you to be who you are. So I come to my mom, I tell her this is what I want to do, and my mom tells me, you can do it, and you're beautiful. And she said so many good things to me that I feel like I can take on the world. So even when she passed away, I felt like I could just do anything and everything. So I would say that my confidence comes from my mother.
And in terms of the other influences, I mean, you're from Borno State, which is the epicenter of Nigeria's Islamist insurgency.
Yes.
How much does that influence what you do?
I think to a great extent, because first of all, I take pride in where I come from, Borno State. And one of the pieces that I wrote is about Borno State. And as much as I left the hometown when I was 11, and still because of the panic and all of that, I'm not able to go back, I still hold strong to my culture. And also, I feel there's need to speak about things that are going on. And for me as a poet, that is how I think I could come in to contribute. So to a large extent, yes, it does have influence.
But are you frightened, for example? Because I mean, you know, people like Boko Haram, ISWAP, I mean, they would probably consider what you're doing to be inimical to what they'd like to see happening certainly in that part of Nigeria.
What I would say about this is, first of all, when you study Islam, Islam is a religion of peace. And a lot of the things that people are doing is not Islam. But you look at it that what these guys are doing is just instilling Islamophobia in a lot of people. And for me, I'm just here to change the narrative. So I consider myself doing the work that, you know, Islam needs to be done on that side, and at the same time changing the narrative. And yes, sometimes you do get frightened, but again, you remember that whatever happens to you, according to the teachings of Islam and what I believe in, whatever happens to you happens by the grace of Allah, by the grace of God. So you do what is right, not really caring what people think, because at the end of the time, at the end of everything, the only validation you need is from God. Okay, stay with us. We want to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Maryam Bukar Hassan, the poet, writer and spoken word performer. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyagolo. My guest today is the intrepid, hugely talented spoken word performer Maryam Bukar Hassan, also known as Alhanislam, whose work is growing in popularity in Nigeria and beyond. She's on a mission to not only capture a bigger audience with her art, but also to empower women and disenfranchised youth using performance poetry to redefine the literary genre and capture what it means to be a young person in Nigeria today. Her videos have repeatedly gone viral, some commanding millions of hits on YouTube in just a few weeks. She was born in Borno State in the northeast, but grew up in Kaduna in the northwest, from where she waxes lyrical on everything from youth alienation to domestic violence, with a wit, intelligence and realism that's become a clarion call for her generation. Well, for more on all that, let's talk to the lady herself, Maryam Bukar Hassan, also known as Alhanislam. What does Alhanislam mean?
Alhan means melody, and Islam is Islam.
Okay, well, the second part I know.
Melody of peace.
Okay, well, that's jolly nice. What is it about poetry and spoken word performance that inspires you?
For me, I think I would say the ability to just become a wordsmith, because when I see
you love the power and the beauty of words and what they can do.
What they can
transformative
do.
Power.
Exactly. And for me, I wanted to be a doctor. So when I couldn't become a doctor,
I can see you as a doctor.
Right. So we have a lot of people coming out saying your words are healing. And to me, that is everything. So I'm like, I wanted to be a doctor, but then I couldn't become that. But I'm a doctor in this regard. And then you find people coming out and speaking their truth. So when I started, I didn't realize the power of poetry, to be honest with you. But as I did advance, I realized its power. And I think sometimes you get this passion about something, but nothing is figured out. And then that's when you start to pursue, and then people look at you as though you're crazy. But for me, I was ready to own my crazy.
But it's not usual, though, for I mean, a Muslim woman, a young Muslim woman coming from that part of Nigeria to do this sort of thing. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just curious how you were able. Did you get a lot of objections when you started?
Oh yes, I did. I did from family, I did from friends, family, except for my mother. Even my dad didn't like it at first because he felt like I was just going to be out there. And you know how sometimes our parents, especially from the north, they don't consider things as music, poetry, as though it's a real career.
They're almost sinful things to do.
Exactly. But again, you look at poetry, even in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he used to love poetry. So he had the companions around him who would perform poetry to him. So he liked it, and it's called shi'r. So for me, I knew that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I got my history right. I understood how to defend myself. And that's why I keep telling people that don't let people teach you your religion. Go learn it yourself.
That's a good point.
And take it from the source. Because everybody has a perception and how they conceive things. And when you let that, you know, just come into your life so much. Some of them, they push in the negativity.
Absolutely. When you concede to someone else what is your right, essentially your ability to understand what you believe in, then that can lead to confusion. But I mean, what message would you say that you have for young people in Nigeria? And is that message different for young Muslims in the north than it is for young Christians in the south?
First of all, my family, I've got Christians in my family, so we are mixed. So whenever I'm pushing out a message, I believe it's for the whole of humanity. It's for everybody. So what I would say to the young people is that, to begin with, when you have a dream, don't ever feel like it is people's duty to encourage you, because it was never their duty to encourage you. But I need you to find a warrior in you to keep you going. because someday they would want to tell the world how they met you.
Sure. And in terms of the mechanics and skills you need to do what you do, did you have to learn to enunciate properly, work on your diction, your vocabulary, all of that? Was that part of the package?
Oh yeah, and then my mom helped me with that. My mom was my manager till she passed away. I started poetry when I was 13 years old. When I started writing, it was just a talent that I just discovered with the help of my mom. So I would just do these things, and my mom would be like, no, you want to be a performer? I need the emotions. You need to connect with people. No, and sometimes there was a time I was recording my album, and then she locked me in the studio and told me I was not going to get food until I finished. And I was crying. She said, I cannot feel where your feelings. I'm
good
just
on your mother there.
Right, it is
very
like,
good on her.
So for me, I think it's really just my mother. The credit goes to my mother. The skill, the packaging, the credit goes to my mother. I didn't go to any school for this. I think last year I attended a master class, just to develop myself, but the credit goes to my mother.
Well, I mean, you've got a lovely voice, very resonant, very clear speech, and very easy to understand, and clearly a good command of English. Do you consider poetry, I mean, you must, for doing this, to have a sort of reforming power, something that can help sort of young people speak out when they perhaps feel shy and closeted, I mean, and allows them to sort of address a wide range of issues that they probably wouldn't have a chance to look at normally?
Yes, for me, I would say that poetry gives you the power to become whoever you want to be. Because for once, those words are yours. That's your sanctuary, nobody else's. So just let it out. Because again, it can serve as therapy. You find out some people when they're depressed, sometimes it's because they can't communicate. But they write it out there, they push it out there, they get people that can connect. And then a network is formed. So it has the power to do more than you can imagine. And I don't think we have fully understood that. But the more I advance, the more I see the things that poetry can do. So yes, I believe it can do that.
And a lot of spoken word performers have influences ranging from sort of rap artists to the likes of Maya Angelou and so on. What are your influences? Well, you mentioned your mother. That's one of them.
My mother is like the first one. The second, Maya Angelou. The third, Bash the poet. The fourth, Titi Lopez Onuga. She is a Nigerian poet. And one of my favorites, Prentice Powell. He's an international poet, Rudy Francisco. And also from the side of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one of his companions, Hassan. Hassan was a poet too, and he was a great poet. So those are my influences.
Sure. Would you say you speak for the people or for yourself?
I speak for both. I speak for both. I believe that there are certain things that you go through that maybe someone out there isn't going through. And then there are times you speak and then, someone is going through something, and there are times that I pick subjects that have to do with the world to speak for people, because sometimes you need to be a voice.
And are you scared of causing offense? I mean, you come from a fairly conservative part of Nigeria. Does that inform and circumscribe the scope and scale of your work?
No, it doesn't.
Right.
I would call myself someone that's fearless, because I don't shy away from addressing the topics that need to be addressed. Like I said, my values, the only validation you need is from God. So sometimes I do things that might upset someone, but I'm just speaking my truth.
Some would say there's an element of you that's feminist there.
Right. But again, I would like to say something that Fakriya said. She said, the concept of feminism is not the same for everybody. It depends on your circumstance.
That's a good point.
Right. So for me, even when I'm considered a feminist, I do not classify myself or just categorize myself to the general one. I pick my battles.
And do you see yourself as doing this for the rest of your life, or do you have other professional interests that you'd like to pursue?
I see myself doing poetry for the rest of my life, but again,
always in some form.
Yes,
yeah.
And then I do a lot of other things. I'm an entrepreneur as well. I have a tea line. I'm into Chinese medicine, which I do cupping for people.
Sure.
So I do other things, and I just see myself trying I'm a free-spirited person and I love to try out things. So I see myself just trying new things, but at the same time holding on to poetry as my primary source.
Well, listen, I want to say thank you very much indeed. I mean, I could talk to you forever, and you really must come back and talk to us again when we've got more time. But Maryam Bukar Hassan, the spoken word performer, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.